Hey everybody, welcome back to Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory, and today's video is my second segment in my top 50 favorite board games of all time as of January 2024. In today's video, I am going through games 30 up to number 21. Let's get started. Okay, and I just wanted to start today's segment with a little bit of housekeeping with, if you like what we're doing here on the channel, consider subscribing. The click of a button really goes a long way to help us out. We will have multiple segments from other members of Talking Cardboard on the channel here very soon as well, where some of the other guys will be doing their top 20 games of all time, top 10 games of all time, and we will be shooting multiple other video segments of those lists here on the channel very, very soon, so stay tuned for that. Let's start it off here with my game number 30 on the list. It was number 35 last year, so staying pretty strong right in the middle here of my top 50 games of all time. This game is Five Tribes. Five Tribes is a game that has been on my list multiple times throughout many years, and I still really enjoy playing this game. In Five Tribes, it is the Mancala mechanism that is mainly used in the game, where you are grabbing handfuls of different colored meeples on a tile and marching them around the board to other tiles, dropping off one meeple at a time as you go from tile to tile. And the color of the meeple you land on that last tile, you can grab all the meeples of that same color to collect them in front of you, and based on the color of meeple you are gathering, it'll give you a special ability or a special action that you're doing. For example, the red meeples are assassins, where you can shoot down other meeples to try to clear off spaces off the board, and there are blue meeples that you can gather that is more for gaining victory points off of tiles, and there are white and yellow meeples you can gather to gain you immediate victory points, and also spend them to hire genies that give you special abilities, or djinns, I guess, that you can hire to give you special actions and abilities for the rest of the game. This game is a very simple mechanism where you're just grabbing those meeples and dropping off one at a time as you move orthogonally around the map on these different tiles, but you are trying to area control these different tiles, and you can place palaces and different things on those tiles to show that you have controlled those tiles for victory points and gaining immediate victory points based on different colors that you're gathering. And like I said, you are trying to clear off these tiles to gain victory points based on the value that is displayed on each tile. It is a 6x6 grid of tiles that are randomly placed at the start of the game to create the asymmetric and random map that you're playing with, and then meeples are drawn randomly out of a big bag of meeples at the start of the game, where each tile starts off with 3 color random meeples on each tile. So the game board is randomly set up, the meeple colors are randomly set up on each tile, and so every game is completely unique to start with. And I just love how simple that is. You just grab a tile full of meeples and you drop them off to try to get different actions on where you are landing, or which tile you're landing on with the last meeple in your hand. So that is pretty much the gist of it, but a lot of fun, and every gameplay of it feels completely unique and different every time. So that is my number 30, Five Tribes. All right, my number 29 game was number 9 last year, so it was in the top 10 games of all time last year, but dropping down to 29 because I just can't find anybody to play this game with. I just love it to bits, but it's very difficult to get to the table for whatever reason, and I don't know why. I might need to find another group of friends that is more willing to play this game with me because I just love it that much. This game is Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. Rurik, Dawn of Kiev is kind of a dry Euro game, but has area control in it. But the way the area control is dealt with in this game is very unique. I really like the core mechanism where each meeple has a sticker on it with a different value associated with it, anywhere from 1 to 5. And there is a common area board, an action board, that everybody is utilizing to perform their actions on. And the higher the value meeple or advisor you are sending to that action board, the better the action is that you get, and also you can perform that action sooner than your opponents. So you are really aiming to use those higher value advisors to get the actions you not only really need for that turn, but also to try to perform those actions before your opponents can perform the actions. And the actions are everything from mustering more troops onto the board, or gathering resources off of the board to try to gather sets of resources for victory points, you can attack with your troops on the board to try to area control these different regions for points as well. So mustering up troops, attacking your opponent, trying to do some area control, all with the unique action selection mechanism with those different value advisors is just a lot of fun, and one that I really appreciate. Again, the simplicity of the actions you're taking, but the heavy strategic effect that it has on the overall gameplay. So that is my number 29, Rurik, Dawn of Kiev. All right, my number 28 game is actually back onto the list this year. It was not on the list at all last year. I believe I had it on my top 50 favorite games of all time a couple years ago and prior to that, but for whatever reason it fell off the list last year, but now has returned for this year's list. And I think it's because we have been getting more plays of it again. And like a common theme here with the top 50 list, if a game is not seeing table time, it is more likely to fall off the list, but the more table time, the more times we get it to the table and play it, again, it kind of reinvigorates the list here again. So number 28 is Clank. With Clank, there are multiple versions of it that exist now today. The original Clank is what I have here on the list because it is what I hold more near and dear to my heart, and obviously is the first version of the game that I own specifically, but nowadays there's also Clank in Space, Clank Catacombs, Clank Legacy. There's so many other versions to Clank, but really you can't go wrong with any version of the game. All the versions are really fun. With Clank, it is a deck building game, but a deck building game with a central board that you are maneuvering around to try to gather artifacts and try to get down into the dungeon and back out before the dragon gets you. There's a really cool mechanism in this game where as you are diving deeper and deeper into the dungeon, you are causing more noise, or therefore more clank, and you are adding these clank cubes of your color to a clank bag, and some of the cards that come out of the main card deck and are flipped face up into the buy row of cards you can purchase for yourself back to your deck, some of those have a dragon symbol on them, and anytime a dragon symbol gets flipped face up into the buy row, then the dragon is going to attack. You put all the clank cubes, or all the noise you've made, you and all your opponents, all the noise you've made, and put it into the clank bag, and draw cubes out of the bag depending on how mad the dragon is, and any amount of cubes of your color that are drawn from the bag is how much damage your character is taking, and if you take up to 10 damage, you die. So you have to be very careful of that. If you die below the surface in the dungeon, you are completely done. You are awarded 0 points, and you are completely out of the game and don't have a chance of winning at all. If you make it above the surface out of the dungeon and you die, you still get to keep your victory points that you have collected throughout the game. And if you manage to grab an artifact and make it back up to the top of the tower as the dragon is attacking and people are dying and you are safe, you are now at the top of the tower and in complete safety, you get a bonus 20 points for the end of the game. That is added onto your score that you accumulated throughout the game. So Clank, a lot of fun with the deck building, but also the exploration element through the dungeon and trying to gather artifacts and trying not to make too much noise to where the dragon will find you and kill you. So that is Clank. All right, my number 27 game was number 16 last year, so staying pretty strong, just falling a little bit, and again, it hasn't been seeing as much table time lately, but this is my favorite stock market game of all time. This game is Stockpile. Stockpile, it's a lot of fun. You are trying to gather shares of stock, and as the share values go up, you can sell them off for money, and you try to sell them off before the shares go down in value. If you have the majority of shares in a stock, by the end of the game, you get bonus victory points for that. But this is all done through a really cool auction mechanism that I really enjoy, where some of the cards, some of the stock cards are flipped face up, some are put in face down into these different columns of cards, or what they call stockpiles, and you are bidding over which stockpile you gain for that round. And you have to spend money, you have to spend some of your own money to gain those stockpiles. And like I said, some of the cards are face down that are in the stockpile, so you don't necessarily know exactly what you're getting, but some of the cards are face up, so you know what shares of those you're getting, and you're trying to get the most shares of the highest value stock and try to sell them off on time before they decrease in value. And just those common stock tropes that you find in the real world, you buy low, sell high, and that sort of thing, but done through a really cool auction mechanism with some hidden information, so that adds a unique twist to it also. That game is Stockpile, my number 27 favorite game of all time. All right, my number 26 game was number 19 last year, and this is a fun game that has a board mixed with trick taking. You don't really hear that very often, where there's more things than just trick-taking going on. Typically when you think of a trick-taking game, that is all there is to it. It's just a bunch of cards that you deal out to you and your opponents or you and your teammates, and you are just trying to take tricks with those cards. But this game adds an element to it where, again, there's some area control on a board that you're fighting over these different positions. This game is Boru. In Boru, like I said, there are different regions of different colors around the board, and depending on what trick you are playing into of what color, that'll tell you which color region you are vying for control over. So it's really cool the way this works, because depending on what color trick you are playing into, you can either try to win the trick of that color to take over that territory for victory points, or if you lose the trick, you still get special abilities off of the card. So you don't necessarily have to win the trick to do some cool actions. You could choose either or, depending on what area is at stake or what your plan is or what your end goal is. There is a few really cool things going on in this game, and it's not just the simple trick taking at heart. I love how it mixes the trick taking with other cool actions going on to vie for control and use your Vikings to combat onto the map and take over these different territories and try to vie for the hand of the queen and try to marry the princess or whatnot for points. And there's just a few different tracks and a few different levers that you're pushing and pulling in this game with that core trick-taking element to it. So that is my number 26, Boru. All right, to my number 25 game was number 27 last year, so it has moved up a couple spots, but still holding strong, and this game has been on the list since my very first list that I ever came out with. This game is Blood Rage. Blood Rage, not too much else to say about it at this point. I'm pretty sure everybody who is watching this knows of Blood Rage and knows what it's all about. But for those of you who don't know what Blood Rage is all about, it is a fun card drafting game, and depending on what cards you draft at the beginning of the round, you can then use those cards for actions. You can use them to hire monsters onto your team, summon more troops to the board. Again, it's another one that I really like area control a lot, but it's another area control game where you're trying to get your troops onto these different regions on the map, but all through that card drafting element at the beginning of each round. There's only 3 rounds to the game, so it goes fairly quickly, and as each round progresses into round 2 and round 3, the cards get better and better that you're drafting for. There's some hate drafting in the game where you're trying to draft a card that you might know your opponent would really need, but keep it for yourself so they can't get it. And like I said, you can hire monsters and hire different characters and troops onto your team. You can draft goal cards or mission cards that you are trying to do different things around the map to get victory points through that by playing your quest, well, they're called quest cards, by playing your quest cards onto the board. And there's just so many fun things to know and to do with in this game where you're holding that hand of cards and you can only draft one of them to keep, and you're passing the rest of them around the table. It's just a lot of tension and just not knowing exactly what the player to your right is going to pass to you, so then you can then draft a card out of that. And it's really fun to try to combo and play with all the different combinations you can while drafting those cards, and then just seeing how those cards play out during the main action phase of the game of each round. So that is my number 25, Blood Rage. All right, to my number 24 favorite game of all time was number 38 last year, and this is one of my favorite worker placement stylish games that I've ever played, and this is Raiders of the North Sea. And the reason why I say somewhat kind of worker placement-ish is because the main core thing that drives this game is that on your turn, you are doing 2 actions. The first action you're doing is you're placing a worker out onto the board to take an action, and then your second action on your turn is you are pulling a different worker off the board to do that second action. So it's a really fun game where, depending on what your opponents are doing with their troops and placing them out onto the board, will kind of tell you what different actions you can then take. Or vice versa, when you are placing a troop out onto the board to take an action, you then know your opponents around the table can then pull that worker off later to take that same action. So it's really cool to try to read the table on what actions people are going to want to do. You are taking actions around the central town to gather more Vikings onto your ship, and you're going out and setting sail to raid these different towns to gather loot and to try to get points in these various ways. There's a bunch of different tracks that you're going up and down depending on your pillaging and how well you're doing different things. But I really like how this is worker placement, but it's worker placement with a twist. So a lot of fun, one that I highly recommend. A game that is a little bit older now, but it still really holds up with that main central mechanism of the uniqueness with the worker placement. So that is my number 24, Raiders of the North Sea. All right, my number 23 game was actually number 23 last year. So sitting in the exact same spot, and one of my favorite cooperative games of all time, and this game is Paleo. Paleo is a nice, light, simple game. I would almost say that this is more of a gateway game. It's a very, very light, very easy game to play, a very easy game to teach, but one that I enjoy playing every single time. In Paleo, you have a stack of cards that have these different backs to them and a different front side to them. The different backs to the cards all have a location on the back. So it's got like a forest region or a mountain or a river or all these different locations. It's got like a camp location on the back of some of these, and that'll kind of hint at which location you might be traveling to try to take on whatever is on the flip side of that card. So the way that this works is that you have a central stack of cards, you shuffle them all out and deal them out equally to you and all of your teammates, so you all have a somewhat equal stack of cards to play with. And on your turn, you can look at the top 3 cards, but just the backs of those cards, and decide which location you're going to visit. Everybody chooses which location they're going to visit and then reveals them simultaneously all at the same time to see what you will need to tackle. So some of the cards might have these different animals that you have to take care of, like a woolly mammoth or a wolf, or these different dangers that come along the way. It might be like a rock slide or a bunch of different things that can come along that you might stumble upon without really even knowing that it was going to happen. And some of the cards might be some good tasks, like you can go out and try to collect herbs or, some medicinal herbs to help heal some of your characters. In this game, if there's a task that you can't handle on your own, you can ask for a helping hand from one of your other teammates or 2 of your other teammates, and as long as they have a helping hand symbol on their card that they flipped over, they can choose to forego their action for the turn to try to spend their resources or use their weapons or use their other tools or components to help you in defeating your card. And on each one of the cards, there's a reward for being successful. Some of the danger cards, there is something bad that happens if you're unsuccessful, and you're just trying to survive as a team. So it just creates for a lot of really fun teamwork in this game. So that is my number 23, Paleo. All right, and just a couple more games here left on the list for today with my number 22 game. It was number 14 last year, so dropping a little bit here to make room for some other games higher up on the list this year, but still holding strong at number 22. And this game is Endless Winter. Endless Winter is another game that's kind of in the same vein of Lost Ruins of Arnak or Dune Imperium, where it combines deck building with worker placement. But what I really appreciate in Endless Winter that makes it a little bit different than the other 2 games I had just mentioned is that the cards don't dictate exactly which worker placement spots you can go to, like in the other games, but they enhance or boost the actions of the different spots you're sending your workers to. So the better cards you have to enhance the worker placement location, that gets you a better and better reward out of that worker placement spot, rather than just saying, oh, you can't completely go there because of the card you have in your hand. You can go to any one of the spots that you want. It doesn't matter, but some of the cards will be more helpful at certain locations that you're sending your worker to, and some cards will be less helpful depending on the location you're going to. So Endless Winter, it's kind of like a smorgasbord of different actions and different things you're doing in this game. So I think that's why it receives a little bit of hate in the community. It's not as high up as the other 2 games collectively from what I've seen because of this, because it's a little bit disconnected and not as jointed in what you're exactly doing, but it's like a bunch of different mini games that you're trying to complete, all with these cards and the worker placement, but I still really enjoy it a lot. For example, there's a worker placement spot where you're trying to hunt for some animals and gather them in front of you, and the better you can do with the set collection of those cards, you'll get more victory points for that. And there's another location where you can send people out to the map and try to place some tents on these different locations for an immediate effect and an in-game ability. You've got some exploration and some building some tents and getting victory points and different actions that way. And like I said, it feels like a bunch of different little mini games, but each one of the mini games is a lot of fun in my opinion. So that is my number 22, Endless Winter. Okay, and before we get into my game number 21, I just wanted to remind you, if you're still watching here and you enjoy the content you're seeing, hit the subscribe button. Just the click of a button really helps us out a lot. And again, stay tuned for future videos from other members of Talking Cardboard giving their top 20 or top 10 favorite games of all time here coming to the channel soon. So let's get back to my game number 21. All right, and the last game on my list here for today is number 21, and it was number 32 last year. So another game that I really enjoy and has just been jumping up the ranks year after year. And this is kind of a miniatures combat skirmish game. This game is Godtear. In Godtear, you've got these different factions, these different color factions that you're bringing to the table ahead of time. Each faction has a hero associated with that they have these very powerful special abilities, and each faction plays out very asymmetrically as well. And you're bringing either 1, 2, 3, or 4 factions to the table ahead of time. Your opponent does the same, and you can bring there's just so many different factions you can buy in this game and bring to the table that you can really combo them and try to build out your team the kind of in the play style that you wish to play ahead of time, and then go head to head against your opponent. Each faction, there are 4 different colors in the game. There's red, blue, green, and yellow. Each of the faction types play out in a similar way depending on the color, but then the different heroes and different minions in those factions have different unique abilities. The unique abilities and their movement and their attack strength and all those other things, all the stats are on a stat card that's in front of you, and you are trying to do actions like move them and use their special abilities to, attack your opponent's characters and trying to take them down and trying to either take down their minions or their heroes. You're trying to plant flags, because if you can plant a flag on a Godtear tile, you get points for that. But your opponent can run by and try to stomp out your flag before the end of the round, so you don't get any points for that. It's kind of like a mix between capture the flag or like plant your flag and then also attack your opponent for points as well. And what I really like about this game that makes it really unique is that it's played out over 5 maximum rounds, and each round of the game, after your actions have depleted, whoever has the most points at the end of that round, the most in-game points, gets a token, depending on what round it is, for the actual points that matter. So for example, in the first round of the game, the token is only worth 1 point. The second round, it's worth 2 points. The third round, the token's worth 3 points, and then back down to worth 2 points and 1 point in the 4th and 5th rounds. So it has this ramp-up effect, this ladder push and pull effect, so that if you have the most points at the end of a round, you take the token for that value, you move your piece that many spaces toward yourself on the ladder, and whoever's side that ladder piece ends up on at the end of the round gathers the token for points. The first player up to 5 points wins the game. So it's really cool. You always feel like you're in the game, even if you have to throw one of the rounds or throw 2 of the rounds to try to set up for a future round, you are still in the game and can still gain victory by the end of the 4th or 5th round. So you always feel like you're in this game. You feel like all the different factions are completely asymmetric and they're all powerful in their own way. A ton of replayability in Godtear, a ton of fun, and just dozens and dozens of different factions that you can go out and choose from and buy and add to your team. So yeah, one that I keep coming back to many times is one of my all-time favorite miniatures skirmish games. So that is my number 21, Godtear. Alright, and that does it here for today's list. My games number 30 up to 21 of my all-time favorite games of all time as of January 2024. As always, leave comments below with some of your favorite games of all time. If there's some games down there that I haven't tried, I will go and seek them out and get them and send a review out to the channel for you all to see on how I enjoy those games. Or if you agree with my list, throw those in the comments down below as well. I like to see and hear your thoughts on games that we might agree on, but maybe you like the game for a different reason than I do, and I'd like to hear about that as well. So until next time, you all have fun gaming and enjoy your day.